What's up guys, Sean Nalawani, RealScienceAthletics.com. And in this video, I want to talk about the number one mistake most lifters make when it comes to performing isolation exercises, whether it's a bicep curl, tricep extension, lateral raise crunch, leg curl, or whatever else. Obviously, the basic compound movements should be making up the cornerstone of your workouts. Those are going to have the biggest overall impact on your gains by far, but including some isolation work after your compound lifts are complete is an effective way to round out your overall physique and get in some extra work for those smaller muscles that won't be fully stimulated just through compound movements alone. Before I get started, if you find this video helpful and you want to get even more daily tips and updates from me, then make sure to follow me over on Instagram as well at Sean Nalawani. And as a thank you for watching this video, I'm also doing a giveaway down below in the comments section where you can win a free product from my fitness supplement line, Real Science Athletics. So just click down below in the comments section to enter in for that. So we know without a doubt that progressive overload is the central underlying principle when it comes to building muscle consistently. You need to be getting stronger over time on your lifts in order to gain muscle. And most people in the gym with basic knowledge of training are at least somewhat aware of this, and they do focus on adding weight and reps to their compound lifts over time, whether it's the bench press or squat or overhead press or whatever else. But for some reason, when it comes to those smaller isolation exercises, a lot of people end up treating them differently, as if somehow progressive overload doesn't really apply. And instead, they treat those exercises more like pump work and just crank out a bunch of reps without really taking stock of how much weight they're lifting or how many reps they're performing. And I even see this being said on some fitness channels where they'll say that isolation exercises don't allow for progressive overload in the same way that compound movements do. And so you should just focus more so on the pump and the mind-muscle connection with those smaller exercises. However, the bottom line is that if progressive overload is the primary driver of hypertrophy, which it is, then this applies no matter which exercise you're doing or what muscle you're training. That basic fundamental law doesn't magically disappear, and you still have to consistently improve on your training performance and subject that muscle to higher and higher levels of tension over time if you want to stimulate new gains. And it's not that isolation exercises somehow don't allow for progressive overload. It's just that because you're doing a single jointed movement that mainly targets one smaller muscle, you obviously can't move as much total weight. And so the increments that you progress by are just going to be smaller. That's really the only difference here. For example, if you're performing a lateral raise, let's say with 20-pound dumbbells, and then you increase to 22.5-pound dumbbells, you're increasing the total weight lifted by 5 pounds, which is actually a 25% increase. Whereas if you were performing, let's say, a bench press with 200 pounds and then you added 5 pounds, the increase there would only be 2.5%, which is 10 times less. So the lateral raise mainly just involves the side delts, and so that entire weight increase is being placed directly on that one muscle, whereas with the bench press, it's being distributed across your chest, shoulders, and triceps, which are all working together synergistically at the same time to move that weight. So with isolation movements, you still need to focus on progressive overload, but you just have to lower your expectations in terms of how quickly those lifts are going to increase and realize that even very small progressions are still significant. And also remember that when you do increase the weight on an isolation exercise, because the percentage increase is going to be larger, like I just mentioned, you're going to feel that increase a lot more heavily. Ideally, for something like a lateral raise, you'd be able to go from 20-pound dumbbells up to 21-pound dumbbells, but unless you're using micro plates in your training, which I'll talk about in a second, your only option is going to be to go up to 22.5s or even maybe 25s depending on your gym. So let me just give a few tips here when it comes to achieving progressive overload on those smaller isolation exercises. So first off, if you increase the weight on an isolation lift and it feels too heavy for you to where you're having to cheat the weight up just to reach the bottom end of your rep range, then what you want to do is go back to your previous weight and focus on training for more reps first. So if you were doing, let's say, a tricep push down for 8 reps, and now you try to bump the weight up, but you find that it feels too heavy, try taking that previous weight up to, say, 10 reps or even 12 reps before trying to increase the weight. Another thing you can do is to adjust the actual execution of the lift to make a given weight more challenging. So one way of doing that is to just add in a brief pause in the fully contracted position. So maybe on a leg curl, you come all the way up and then you hold the weight at the top for a 1 to 2 second count. That's another method you can use to get stronger with a given weight before you increase to the next weight increment. You can also slow down the negative a bit. You can use rest pause, which means performing your prescribed number of reps, resting 10 to 15 breaths, and performing a few more reps and then repeating that once or twice. Or you can also just bump up the volume a bit and perform an extra set or two for that given exercise. So remember that progressive overload doesn't just have to involve adding more weight to the bar. It just means improving your performance on a given exercise in some way. Increasing the weight should be your ultimate goal when you're still a novice lifter, but if you are stuck on a given weight, then you can incorporate those other methods I just mentioned to help you break through to the next weight increase. And then the other point that I'd add in here is the concept of micro-loading, which is to find ways to decrease the total amount of weight you're adding each time so that the percentage increase isn't as big. So let's say you're doing a machine isolation exercise, but the weight stack only goes up by 10 or 15 pounds at a time. Depending on the machine, you can try resting a small dumbbell on top of the weight stack, or you can also try hanging a 2.5 or 5 pound plate off the weight pin like you see here. This is a method that I personally use all the time. And if you're really serious about this, then another thing you can do is to actually buy magnetic microplates online that attach to the end of the dumbbells or the bar you're using. It's perfectly reasonable to go from say 80s to 85s on a compound exercise like a dumbbell press, but sometimes adding 5 pounds aside to an isolation exercise like a bicep curl, sometimes that can be too much. And so using microplates can be helpful so that you can increase the weight more gradually. But the bottom line here, guys, is that, as I've said so many times before, progressive overload is the primary driver of muscle growth, and there's no reason at all why this doesn't also apply to isolation exercises. The only difference is that the progression is going to come more slowly because you're only training a single muscle group using a single jointed movement. But that doesn't change the fact that you still need to be improving on your performance over time in some capacity. Increasing the weight lifted and the number of reps executed, that should be your main focus for as long as you can comfortably do that. And then if you do get to a point where adding more weight isn't practical anymore because of increased joint stress, let's say, for example, you can't just add more weight to a dumbbell lateral raise forever because eventually it is going to put a lot of stress on your shoulders. At that point, you can focus on other methods of progressive overload, like training for higher reps, using static holds, slower negatives, more total sets, rest pause, things like that. But in the same way that you should be tracking your progress and writing down your lifts every week for all of the compound movements that you perform, you should be treating isolation movements in exactly the same way and striving for improved performance over time. Otherwise, you're missing the whole point of performing that exercise in the first place. If you found this advice helpful and you want to grab a complete step-by-step plan that shows you exactly how to lay out your compound and isolation lifts throughout the week for the very best gains, the optimal training split, exercise selection, volume, frequency, rep ranges, and more, make sure to take my physique quiz over at quiz.seannall.com because that'll hook you up with everything you need to know based on your individual goals, body type, and experience level, and take you from where you are now all the way up to your goal physique as efficiently as possible. You can click up here for that or use the link in the description box below. And as always, make sure to hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe if you haven't already in order to stay up to date on future videos. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.